No worries.
Okay, you're live now, and I'll drop the YouTube chat page link here in chat.
Perfect.
Thank you, David.
Happy to help.
Also, the Linux Foundation Antitrust Policy, as per customs, the Linux Foundation Antitrust Policy. The Linux Foundation meetings involve participation by industry competitors, and it is the intention of the Linux Foundation to conduct all of its activities in accordance with applicable antitrust and competition laws. It is therefore extremely important that attendees adhere to meeting agendas and be aware of and not participate in any activities that are prohibited under applicable US state, federal, or foreign antitrust and competition laws. Examples of types of actions that are prohibited at Linux Foundation meetings and in connection with the Linux Foundation activities are described in the Linux Foundation Antitrust Policy. If you have questions about these matters, please contact your company counsel, or if you're a member of the Linux Foundation, feel free to contact Andrew Up the Grove of the firm of Gartner Up the Grove LLP, which provides legal counsel to the Linux Foundation. Hyperledger is committed to creating a safe and welcoming community for all. For more information, please visit our Hyperledger Code of Conduct. So, my pleasure to have you all here this evening. This time, my pleasure to introduce you to Harri Rantanen from Finland, who works for SEB, Svenska Enskilda Banken. As pretty interesting, I got in contact with them a few weeks back in time, and he showed me some interesting projects. So I invited him to join us today to let us see what he's working on for a few time. And I leave it on to him to have a presentation of his work. Harri, I'll leave the groundwork for you, and I'll leave it into you to have the presentation. You can step in and have your slides presented to the attendants.
All right, thank you very much, Andre. I'm really honored to be here on your community, being also active in a couple of other communities. Now there are some background noise, but
Andrea, you're set as host now, so you can mute people.
Yeah, all right, thanks. It was quite nice singing anyway. So let's start. I have a couple of slides prepared for you, and then I will have a slight kind of a multimedia show today. I will show you and practice also the things that I'm working with, and hopefully there are some value for you as well. So the header for the session today is, do we understand our data? And the key question today is why. Like you see there, we start asking why when we are 3 years old, and even the pop bands are asking that. But finally, we as a business people, IT people, technical people, blockchain people, we also are really interested of the question why. And you will understand why this is a key question today. So let's see if I can get my presentation rolling. Yeah, I'm coming from SEB. It's Skandinaviska Enskilda Banken, not Swedish, Svenska. But anyway, it's a Nordic bank with 160 years tradition and existence, and grounded by Wallenberg family, who is still really active both in banking and in a multitude of other good initiatives regarding artificial intelligence and so on, funding many items in the Nordic countries where we are delivering good things in digital way. And I have been working in SEB for 13 years, and now last 3 years as a business developer, looking at the future, both from our own banking perspective, but also from our customers' perspective. I'm serving mostly large corporations and financial institutions, but I have some background as well for the private customer and SME point of view. That's a little bit about SEB, not that much, and here is our agenda today. We will discuss about information management. We will talk about the knowledge graphs, web semantics. I will present you another community that we have been running for 3 years or 4 years actually already, Standardized Trust. then some practical cases how the knowledge graphs actually can improve our understanding of our data, and then a summary as well. And you will get this presentation in a PDF format. So the presentation is filled with hyperlinks with interesting, hopefully interesting links of data where you can dive in a deeper way into the items that I'm really scratching the surface today. So I have a tight agenda. Let's hope that I will be able to deliver everything that I was planning to. But let's start with the data sharing mantras that we are dealing with, and mostly, especially from the banking perspective. We are really careful of what we are sharing. But I had recently reading this Gartner report about how actually important it is to share the data. So the point here is that the organizations that are following must share data mantra instead of don't share data are making better business overall. So it's really critical that we are now moving into digital world, platforms, ecosystems that are based on information sharing. And if you are not able to do that, then you are not really well participating in that kind of ecosystems and platforms. So that's really critical to keep in mind, that when you have your data and analyst organization, that they are knowing these challenges, that it's not only think that it's careful to share the data. Of course, there are a lot of regulation here regarding this. I can tell it from banking perspective, but there are also many ways to mitigate those risks and being able to participate in the new way of working, a new way of making business. And a good example of that is that everyone knows football all over the world. And Kevin De Bruyne was a really good example of this. Just recently, it was in the news in Mirror that he actually did a raise increase, salary increase from the Manchester City organization by only analyzing the full data that this is delivered on the games that he was playing and he was not playing. And then he was able to show, based on the data analysis without any agent, how important guy he is for Manchester City. And this is really a really nice example of that, how important thing we are talking about, really practical level. So the key element here is that we have to understand the data hierarchy. And this is really good pyramid of showing what we are talking about. And we many times we say that the data is the new oil, but it can be also oil in a bad sense, meaning pollution, if we do not make any sense out of that data. So practically the data, what we are dealing with is only what? It's a extract of the real world by some kind of metrics that we have been defining ourselves via standards or market practices. Do we measure kilos or pounds? That's up to different metrics that we are using, but it's not telling that much. It's only a extraction of the real world. Then when we start moving from what to who, where, and when, then we are combining the data together, so that, for example, in my case, I can show you that there is a bank account with some data, and there is a closing date balance on the 2019 date for 5,000 euros, even on the credit side. It now has an informational meaning. But then to make that even more meaningful, answering the question how, then we are talking about the semantics. We have to be able to compose that information into the new level, meaning that we have a understandable set of information available. So now I can start making conclusions that how this is possible that my bank account is on 5,000 euros credit side. And finally, the last thing that we humans are good are exactly asking the question why. Why this is important information, why this information is meaningful on knowledge point of view. And then we are answering the question why. We can make decisions out of that. We can start predicting things like I have been doing now in my slide here as well. So data must be fine-tuned into information, knowledge, and wisdom to be able to make that meaningful. And there are now, luckily, tools that are not only dealing with that data and information level, but we are now able to start doing as well as via the semantic world and semantic approach. We are able to make that information available for knowledge and even for the wisdom level, so that we can participate in that decision making in a good way, and we can take off trivial operations with the data. So what about the knowledge graphs? My history is coming from ISO 2022 or 20022, which is a financial services standard, started 2004. I have been working in financial services practically 30 years already, and this was a really big revolution. And that's from the perspective that finally we got a common standard for 5 domains. We have payments domain, trade domain, FX, cards, and that's giving us, and securities, giving us capability to talk in the same language. The ISO 2022 business model and repository, electronic data dictionary and repository is available there in the ISO 2022 pages, but it's still not having yet a true semantics, even though when I was still working 2019 in the management group of ISO 2022, we started already before that a working group that is focusing on this semantic technology. And hopefully in a couple of upcoming weeks and months, also ISO 2022 data and business model can be transformed into this kind of semantic model to be available for further operations that we will be discussing further on. And everything here is related to internet evolution. So we have started this internet evolution with Web 1.0, which was actually only reading the web pages that are available there. So it was only output from different HTTPS or HTTP sites that you could evaluate what kind of data there is on each and every home site. Then we moved into the social web, where we could also show our fingers up and down, participating into different discussions and also giving content into different home sites and different data storages that were available there. So it was the next step for making the web on the next level, 2.0. And now we are talking about this 3.0 web, which is actually started 2016, and the key person there, which is now Tim Berners-Lee, having a SIR as a ranking for him. It wasn't there yet in 1996, but nowadays it is. So Tim Berners-Lee has said that the vision already, the Web 3.0 vision in 1999, that we are moving into linked web, so that the web is also executing some stuff by itself, and the home sites, web pages, humans included, can be operating that by themselves. And that means that we have a semantic web available, which is combining the approach that we human beings are doing together with the machines. And that is really the important thing that we are able to do now, having the web semantics available, describing us how to do that in practice. So moving into semantic web means that also the latest developments in blockchains and the distributed ledger technology are moving this web into stateful web, so that we can, instead of storing data in a multitude of places as copies, we can also use that as a immutable one single instance, and then change the states of that instance available. And of course, part of that development is the Internet of Value, meaning that we have also these crypto coins, stable coins, and now a multitude of central banks also developing the digital currencies available for making value exchange even easier way available, so that we can start including Internet of Things data available, making triggering of the transactions automatically. And even in the spatial web, we can combine humans into the web with the augmented reality and virtual reality. But finally, the knowledge graphs, what is the meaning of that? That started 2012. And this is part of the WGC semantic web vision. So the idea here is, like it's there in the picture, that we can have whatever database, blockchain, whatever homepage structure, whatever, we define simple definitions of simple things like cities being a place. We can make a person available, and then we have a date, for example, available. We can have an artifact available, and then we define them commonly with a semantic, so that what they actually mean. And it doesn't matter what kind of technology you're using for storing that kind of data. And then we start making triples, meaning that we have simple statements available, like we use in a human language as well. We can say that the sky is blue, so we have subject, we have predicate, and we have object. And this kind of triples are described in the knowledge graph, so that you can see in the screen that Bill is a person, Alice is also a person, Bill has visited Eiffel Tower, Eiffel Tower is a place, and Louvre is a museum, and it's located in Paris. And we can make quite complicated and easily understandable statements out of these instances of data and information. And that makes that possible both as humans and machines to understand. And that's really critical. That's the work that W3C has done, describing also a multitude of technologies how to make this available, and even query language on that, so that we have a common ontology, so that we understand what we are talking about, and then agreeing a common language on that how this language should be used in different contexts. And this makes it possible that all the data and information that is available there from different sources can be combined in an understandable way. And suddenly, both humans and both machines can understand what the context is, what kind of links are there between these nodes in the knowledge graph. So again, saying this finally, that we started from the flat files, and we have been moving into relational data models, different kind of databases that are there. Then the XML revolution started, and we have schemas that are able to deliver validated data between different endpoints. And still there we were using a lot of FTP or SFTP to move the data from point A to point B. But then 2004, the definition of the semantic web started by W3C, and 2013, the knowledge graphs were created based on that semantic web languages. And of course, again, starting from the big text. So Google is using this technique, and they have their own knowledge graph implementation by themselves, which is practically openly available via APIs. So if you're interested of that, you can look that into, or from the Google developer site, you can make any of your requests or queries that you're doing in the Google pages. You can make a JSON LD description out of that and start using that in your own processes of automated systems and linkages that you are doing. And finally, of course, why this is so important is that when we are talking the same language, we can look at from the natural language processing, NLP point of view. And then we can start doing these distributed semantic representations, algorithms that are based on knowledge graphs, because then it's easier for us humans to be programming this kind of stuff when we have knowledge graph available and the semantics available for the data, wherever that is in whatever technology stored. Then the combination of the data can be done, and we can start utilizing artificial intelligence for analyzing the data, like Google is doing, Facebook is doing. By the way, Facebook is doing only for their own data, but Google is combining all the data in the internet using that same logic which they have in their knowledge graph implementation. And of course now ISO 2022 gradually moving into this space as well as a financial services standard that we are using in multitude of ways in the banks, and coming as a practice standard, market practice standard 2025 in all the banking when it comes to payments domain. So all the data will be moved in structured data instead of old empty messages that were a little bit more unstructured, actually quite a lot of more unstructured. So how this is evolving in the financial world overall with the semantics? There is already EDM Council, Enterprise Data Management Council, that is working on this, and they have created this financial industry business ontology, FIBO, if you want to call it like that. And FIBO is available there for you. So you can go into FIBO viewer in the internet and start browsing the stuff that is available there. It's not 100% covering all the financial services information, but many of the items are there available, like business entities, which is really interesting to look into, that you can deep dive already into that stuff from your own point of view. So the hyperlinks are working quite well, so you can explore afterwards, after this presentation, also by yourself, all these resources available in the presentation. Okay, that was the theoretical part of the session, and let's move into practical part. So we created 2017 a community called Standardized Trust, and the aim for that is creating a common language for trade finance. We had a boot camp where we had people coming in from different perspectives, from corporations, vendors, banks, and we had a discussion, and we created a white paper which is available there on the standardizedtrust.com, which you can download. It's still really valid paper. We found out that there are really some pain points that we have to address 2017. We talked about standards and actually semantics already there, because in that time, EU level e-invoice semantic model was just coming up. It was in the discussion to be a regulation, which is it now already. So we were copying that semantic model approach from there, and then, of course, making standardized approach available for the team. So we have now about 300 plus members in LinkedIn group, which we use mostly for the market intel. But then we have the actual working group, 20 plus active members, with which we have been using our expertise voluntarily, without any fees, without any budget, into guarantee, not only bank guarantee, but overall guarantee definitions. So we can jump into the Standardized Trust homepage, and I can show you some basic facts from this point of view. We have working groups here, and nowadays we work within this working group number 2. And the latest stuff that is available there is in OneDrive. We do everything openly, so you do not have to pay anything. You just commit yourself into the team, and suddenly you are able to look into the semantic model draft as we are working here. So we have started with a ISO 2022-based 2013 data model that we have been fine-tuning into our purposes. And now it's a living document that we are working here. So we have a data set that is describing the undertaking, with which we have defining all the necessary fields that we need for making the undertaking available. And it's a quite longish description. And at the same time, we also make a comments available how, for example, ICC rules like URDG can be applied into each and every point that is there. We have also used the code lists available, so that if you want to see, for example, different undertaking parties that are there, they have been also added into the lists. So you can make this as a really living document, and you can use that also available for any kind of use case mapping. So you can have the code lists available if you want to make a use case of rental guarantee, counter guarantees, whatever. And all these code lists are coming from the Standardized Trust homepage. We have a resource site here, so we have all the guarantee code lists that are in the Excel sheet dynamically linked from this homepage. So we have links available here. So we have tried to make this as modern as possible and easily amendments available, so that we can agree what kind of stuff we are delivering, easily available for anyone who is available for this setup. So, and also in the OneDrive, I can show you, just wait a second, I go into the right page here. We also now started lately a JSON description as well. So we have made from the Excel sheet a JSON schema that I can show you here. So we can make that available for the ones that are technically interested of how this common model, voluntary and freely available, openly available, whoever, can be applied into what kind of platform, vendor, system, or application of different guarantees you would like to implement with that. And of course, we have been now exercising as well how that would look like in a JSON payload. So there's a short example of that, what kind of surety rental guarantee could be described in JSON payload, so that whatever machines can understand and read it in the purposes of using that. We will not go into, in this team, into any kind of application details, security solutions, or whatever. We focus on the practical side of the guarantee descriptions and start and continue on that. We will gradually move now from the guarantees also to the documentary credits, but due to our small team, it will take some time to finalize the guarantee descriptions available. But we have really active team, and I'm really positive that we will be able to deliver this year for the guarantees. And of course, again, there will be a life cycle management after that, how we will be able to compose that further. So that was the community story there. And of course, if you are interested to join Standardized Trust, just inform yourselves into LinkedIn community. First of all, I will approve you easily there to be members. And then if you will be able and interested of joining the actual working group, being active on guarantee or documentary credit, semantic model descriptions, please inform me and I will be able to put you available into the team. So the latest members in our team are coming from the Global Trade Corporation Digital Vault Services, a new service for guarantees available on a cloud-based services. Then another practical case. I'm just looking to my clock that I'm still in the timetable. Yes, we made a proof of concept together with one of our customers, Wärtsilä in Finland. Wärtsilä is a manufacturer of different digital and physical goods for marine technology, for example. And they are also delivering power plants all over the world, and they have a multitude of digital services as well available. SEB is the bank that I'm presenting here, and we were the financial sponsor of this proof of concept that we wanted to test in the secure corporate data sharing. And then we used the platform of Sitra, which is Finnish Innovation Fund, and the IHAN testbed that I will talk about a little bit later. What does it mean? And then we had two vendors, Digital Living as a main vendor here, and the creator of the data economies Nexus, which is a data sharing enabler platform, and then Nixu, which is a global cybersecurity company coming from Finland, which is doing a multitude of good things around the cybersecurity. And what we did actually was a proof of concept for secure corporate data sharing. And we had a use case of trade finance letter of credit. A small part of that process were advising bank as SEB and the exporter Wärtsilä were exercising a data sharing on digital consent basis, so that we created a platform based on Sitra, digital identities for us and Wärtsilä, and then identities for end users, link them together, and then the end users could be giving consents for the data set instead of sharing documents like we usually do. We have to do still in the letter of credit when the advising bank is delivering the requirements of the letter of credit to the exporter. Exporter responds by the documents, and now we exchanged everything there into data sets. And there are press releases and case studies in details available for that, but I will show you now a short video. Just wait a second, I make ensuring that I have sound as well included. Now it's there. So we can enjoy now a short video, 3 minutes, creating and showing how this works in practice. So that was the case in the short video, and let's go back into the presentation here. The key idea, like you saw in the video, is that we used open standards, even in the data, if it was available, and the security side, OpenID, logins, and all that stuff available. And we even had a possibility to go into further in self-sovereign identities. I will talk about those as well. But we did this in a mock-up way so that we didn't need to go into that verifiable credentials way of sharing the consents in this case. But the key element here was that we were able to run this case in the Sitra IHAN testbed, and I will show you here some technological features of that IHAN testbed, which was the basement for sharing the data. And the key element here is the data is not shared on the platform as such. It was really critical from the customer side to say that none of this business critical information will be shared on the actual platform, but it can be shared only by data owner into the data user, consumer, by these consents that they were giving to this. So practically all that architecture what on the IHAN testbed is available as well here on the home pages. So you can also dive into these links and look into how the actual testbed is working. So we do productized APIs, meaning standard APIs that are registered on the platform, and then you can link corporations and end users into those APIs and delimit who can use those APIs for different purposes. And the data products that are there are based on the actual standards as well. So practically everything available again in the GitHub. I will show you here the standards that are available already. And we go into the invoice data that I can show to you in a JSON format. This is not any standard invoice payload, but we used in the test all the standards that were available there. I can even show the JSON LD documentation of this, which is not available there yet on the internet. But the JSON LD, the link data description, is describing actually the data elements from which standard they are taken off. So we used EDM Council, we used PEPL, we used ISO 2022 and different other standards to make the fields available on any standards on standards that are there already, without creating any new stuff that was needed there. Of course, we also wanted to share, for example, Incoterms, and that was something that was not available in any standard yet. But to create something new is also quite easy in this standard test bed, so that you can create the definitions in a knowledge graph way as well, so that the data is understandable also by anyone who is willing to read and come as a participant in that. And one key element in the exercise is in the rulebook of the Sitra Fair Data Economy platform. And this rulebook is available as well for anyone to look into, because this is done by legal, technical, and functional business people as a template for any kind of contractual framework for data sharing, corporate data sharing, so that the different participants in the network can be joining in a good way when there is no regulation or other legal framework available. Though then, of course, the participants of the network should agree how the data will be shared. And this is giving a platform and template for that. And I just heard that this is already translated into Portuguese, because their national health system was willing to start using this as their template in their system development. So this is one part of the larger development now in the data sharing, where EU is trying to compete with the big techs, Amazon's and Microsoft Azure and Google Cloud, so that we are dealing with the FAIR data instead of putting all data available as such in data sets into cloud-based solutions. So Gaia-X is the project name, and then it's collaborating with the International Data Spaces Association. And then, of course, Sitra IHAN that we were using in the proof of concept is part of this Gaia-X initiative, and it's more practical. I even copied some facts that were composed by the participants and digital living colleagues into this kind of analysis of how these different platforms like the big tech platforms, Gaia-X and EHAN testbed, how they can be compared with each other. So like I said, the EHAN testbed is ready for testing. It has been already used for a multitude of test cases. And now, of course, also there will be new cases available as well, because it has been quite successful in this proof of concept way of working. Finally, other enablers that we will need in this digitalization of the trade finance and businesses overall. I remember 2 weeks ago, the same team here was discussing about MLETR, which is coming from the United Nations Commission on International Trade Law. And there has been now really good developments from this 2017 when the MLETR was released. Bahrain, Abu Dhabi Global Market and Singapore has been adapting that or starting to adapt this into legal framework, and UK is now setting their own goal for year 2022. And G7 just in last month agreed that yes, this will be the way forward on these big countries that are also dominant in the global trade. And this is really critical for the development overall and digitalization of trade finance. And then we will need this trust. So this is linked into Web 3.0 semantics. There is really important part and block called trust that we have to solve. That wasn't solved in the early days of development of internet. And again, WGC is doing good work there, defining this trust over internet protocol basement based on this TOIP foundation. And there is also these good other standardization bodies available, and included Hyperledger as well, because SSI identities, they are mostly run by the Sovereign Foundation and the base code from Hyperledger Indy and Iris, which are used for this kind of wallet-based solutions that was also available and possible to implement in our proof of concept that we did with Wärtsilä. But like I said, we didn't go that far yet, but it will be available there if we need to implement that in a similar way. So finally, we have a summary. I have used most of my time, but I wanted to conclude in the end like a wish list and the building blocks. First, with the wish list, what kind of components we will need to make business digitalization happen in practice. It might be trade finance digitalization, it can be whatever other digitalization, but we need to have a common legal framework so that we have a capability to exchange, not documents, papers, but we can exchange data sets instead. And MLETR is really good basement for that. Internationally, we need also these digital identities so that I can interoperate with my digital identities in whatever country, whatever service provider is giving services, so that I can identify myself to them. I can identify myself as a persona in a company. And of course, companies can be identified as digitally as well, and even the things, so that the things can be ensured that they are exactly the things that we are supposed to be connected with, and not any kind of bootlegs or something else. And then we need these business data standards, should be also openly available. So it's not only a question of standard, also the market practices, harmonization of those business standards should be available. And then the data sharing. We should be able to share the data in a secure way with digital consents. And then it again should be openly available as a governance rulebook so that we can agree with the data sharing network participants, by all of them, how we will do that until there will be maybe some regulation or law available. But before that, we have to make a contractual agreement how to make the data sharing happen, because it's needed, like you remember from the beginning of the presentation. The organizations that are sharing data, participating in data sharing platforms, they are making better business than the other ones. And then finally, everything should be openly available for these development resources. There is really many ways to compete, but the basic stuff which we need for digitalization should be openly available. No fees included, no partnerships, no VIP memberships, like we are doing in the Standardized Trust. We should be sharing our knowledge and expertise like many developers nowadays are doing via GitHub and internet overall. If you have a question regarding JSON or JSON LD or semantics, you will find an answer by multitude of communities using that. And then I finally made a conclusion with the building blocks in my very last slide, like Lego bricks. We have Untitled MLETR, Trust over Internet Protocol, legal entity identifier. You can look into that verifiable credential proof of concept that they did with the Evernym using this sovereign foundation and blockchain technology there. It's really fantastic what they did. And this will be the way of identifying organizations globally instead of using national level identifiers. Then we need the semantics and knowledge graphs to fine-tune our data into level that can be used in artificial intelligence. We need the secure corporate data sharing. And then we will need these rule books, especially in trade finance, uniform rules like ICC has been always doing, and then their transformation to digital world as well. And then the DSI, Digital Trade Standard Initiative, led by Oswald Keiler, who is also have been talking to you here. That's really critical initiative that makes these standards available for anyone who is willing to develop something on those. Shipping, the bill of lading is really critical, or forwarders cargo receipts, really critical for the trade finance system follow-ups, and DCSA, the Digital Container and Shipment Association, Shipping Association, they have started really good work as well, starting this kind of standardization. And FIBO I was talking about, and then we have Bruyne network as well, who has done already semantic APIs available for creating infrastructures for banking services or financial services available by any kind of payment service provider or bank or financial institutions overall. So as a banker or developer for banks, I would really recommend to look into FIBO and Bruyne together. And then we need collaboration like we are doing today. We have to share our knowledge, we have to share our skills and put them available on the same table and start discussing how to make these building blocks available. Some of them already there, some of them will be there, and then to put them available when we have all the legal framework, market practices, uniform rules equipped with the digital needs, then we are also already ready with the different platform, system and process applications there available. And now I will stop and leave some room for the discussion as well.
Thank you so much, Harri. It was a really compelling presentation. I see Eugenio would love to make questions to you, so I'll lead on to him.
Thank you, Andrea. Hi, Harri. It's really nice to meet you here, and I thank you very much for the presentation because I think it really goes on one of the core issues, at least in terms of operational interoperability and trying to harmonizing the operation on different DLT finance networks. I would like to make a question, taking as a reference the slide which you showed on having a pyramid and showing essentially different data analysis perspective or perception from the market. And I would like you to ask, according to your opinion, which kind of, I would say, level understanding the trade market, different trade market participants are actually having to understand their own data and how, as a community, we could help the trade finance market to elevate that understanding and reach the maximum. Thank you.
Yeah, good question, and it's quite funny. Also, an experience from our proof of concept that when the corporations are sharing and we share the data between each other in trade finance, which is based on papers and PDFs can be shared without any concerns, or let's say major concerns. But when that document, for example, invoice, it's not on the paper, but we compose that into structured data set. Suddenly, we start discussing and being concerned about, is this relevant? How can I secure that when I share this invoice data with you, that you use it only for this specific purpose? So yes, we start to understand the value of the data when we move from paper, which is actually a printout of these facts, or partly also information because it's a set of data already composed who, where, when. So practically we are still in this area, data and information area, on many stakeholders in the trade finance and even global trade. Like I said, the shipping data is also there available. I remember DCSA presentation saying that unfortunately 95% of the documentation in the shipping and logistics is still on paper, even though a good work has been done for standardizing that as well. But that's coming from that you cannot refer that into data sets in possible disputes in any court. So we have a way to go to make semantics work so that we can understand how the knowledge part and finally the wisdom part of the data.
Okay. Oh, okay. I understand. It seems that there is still a long way to go, but essentially what we are doing is trying to reach the peak.
Yes, definitely. And it has been happening now lately a lot. So I started my trade finance journey from payments domain, let's say 10 years ago, when that was so painful for no standards available, but only Swift network standards for many really real large corporations only available. And now suddenly in the last 2 years, 3 years, it has been starting to happen by ICC and other stakeholders. So we are in the right path now, and finally COVID also pushed us to make this happen in practice. Good. Any other questions?
Yeah, just a question from myself, Harri. I was, I'm a long-term trade finance specialist, working with the LCs, massively, when you deal with Africa and Middle East, this is one of the core points. Electronifying the LC, the basis is already there, but the ICC, which is the EUCP 2.0. How do you integrate in your work? How do you comply with the statements by the EUCP 2.0? How was your experience with this new set of rules, which I would love to remind that so far is very poorly used? I mean, it's more almost than used, although there were several released about this.
Yeah, and then that is under construction and update as well into URDTT, meaning that ICC is doing this work for unifying rules for digital trade transactions, meaning that now they will also apply into rules that how this will be available for digital and database exchange, which is really good. And the what we found out in our proof of concept was also interesting, because the large corporate customer, Wärtsilä in this case, was also suggesting that when we move into data sharing, why should we wait for all the documents or data sets being available from corporate to be shared with the advising bank? If they have invoice ready already with all the data available, why can't they start using continuous presentation instead? Meaning that in that pace that they get the data ready, they can send it to the bank or have a consent for the bank so that the bank can have the access for the data. So there will be most probably challenges and challenge for the uniform rules by moving into digital processes. Because when we find out that we have the new tools available and we can share in practice in real time when the data is ready, data for the actual stakeholders on that LC, it will change the need of the rules as well. And of course, finally, when we are moving into MLETR type of implementation in the legal framework, that will again enable us to do new work, like ITFA, International Trade and Fating Association, and BAFTA are doing now. They are promoting these digital negotiable instrument initiatives, also pushing legal framework to move forward so that electronic bill of ladings can be used for automated triggering for the electronic payment undertaking, so that automation comes along and we have to apply these into the uniform rules as well. Again, a way to go.
Yeah, there is a let's say a question, hold on, from Patrick here in the chat, and he's stating, as a professional focused on creating data standards, to leverage within blockchain-enabled environments. Hold on. I get problems with my PC. It seems to me that there is still too much fragmentation.
Yeah, that's yeah. I can share from the payments domain experience of ISO 2022 implementation that exactly that happened, because the standard alone is not good enough. We have to agree by the market stakeholders how we use the standard. So we have to agree there's information and knowledge level so that we have a common market practice, how to do that. And semantics really could work, a good tool for doing that. So again, whatever technology and storage you are using, we should agree on the common language, how we use the standard commonly. So we have, for example, in languages, we have a grammar, and we still are making different interpretations what I am actually saying to you now, because you understand it from different perspectives and different backgrounds. So this is really critical that we agree on the market practices as well, because that is the only way to avoid fragmentation. It was starting to happen in ISO 2022 use cases as well in the early days, 2005, 2006, before the SEPA time started to use that as well. So we agreed to make a market practice group as well available to include banks and vendors and end users, corporations together to agree on those rules. And that we have to do as a collaborative work together in the trade finance domain as well. Are you still hearing me?
Oh, sorry. I was muted and I did not realize that happened.
Yes.
I was telling, would love to expand the picture from trade finance, which is basically based on banks, to trading more general, which makes that you have many actors into the picture, and some of them, of course, they are institutional. How do you see the challenges in bringing them in picture? Are they fit enough in trade finance nowadays, trade finance, to participate in this collaborative effort? I mean, if you look at it,
I forgot to show you one picture, which is a value network that we did in the Wärtsilä proof of concept. So I can show you here, this was a collaboration by excellent work by Digital Living International. They actually build up from the two proof of concept cases, the LC cases that we used in proof of concept, the value network. So this is describing one single letter of credit, all the stakeholders in one letter of credit documentation. So practically we have 4 layers. We have banking and finance, like you said, the banks are there. Then we have the business side, buyer and seller agreeing an agreement, making all that invoices available and all other related documentation. Logistics layer, who is delivering the goods from the seller to the buyer, and then the manufacturing part, which is producing the goods that are delivered. We actually tested even really mini-scale digital twins for these tunnel thrusters delivered by Wärtsilä, so that we can relate into the goods that are delivered, which is usually not needed in the LC case at all. And if you go further in the zooming, you can see that we have a knowledge graph here behind. I can show that also as a model that we used in the proof of concept. So here is a letter of credit value network in knowledge graph as well described. So this makes the stakeholder value network visualized, meaning that then of course you can also realize that it's not only buyer, seller, seller's bank and buyer's bank that are involved in this global trade. It's only the trade finance part. When we add the logistics, shipping, when we add the manufacturing part, all the suppliers, all the customer side as well as buyers, we come into the totally new picture, which is the complexity of trade, global trade overall. And that is exactly the reason why we will need these rules and market practices by collaboration, because otherwise there's a risk that we will go into logistics standards and manufacturing standards and business standards and trade finance standards. We have to be able to break the walls here between business layer and banking layer, we actually do, and I do that on my weekday basis, making the automation on triggers happening on smart contracts and on how to make the payments flow automatically if all the terms and conditions of the contracts are met and so on. And we have to break the layer between business and logistics side so that we have a capability of connecting these value network layers and nodes closer to each other and automate these relations between each other by standardization and making that happen in a secure way. That doesn't have to be compromised anyhow.
Sorry, Mark here, but I think isn't that one of the biggest challenges that we have? I mean, it's interesting that you have this slide here, is data the new oil? I got an interesting quote during the week from Margaret Vestager, where she said, data is not oil, it's a renewable source that needs to be pooled, shared, and reused. And we need to make sure that we make, that businesses make the most of the data. But again, the biggest part about it is actually securing access to that data, ensuring the trust in the data, that it is protected from misuse. So I think this is one of the things that the challenges that we have in terms of building these platforms and ecosystems, that while there are not many barriers at a technical level, it's always the legal compliance, security, and trust, making sure that the data is shared with the people, with the relevant people who need to have access to data only for a valid use case. And I do agree with you in the sense that, we tend to treat paper differently than digital data.
Yeah.
I mean, papers are left on desks and what have you, even though a lot of companies have, security policies and what have you. But, there's, we send, as soon as we go digital, the bar is lifted so much higher.
Yeah. And I just noticed I didn't share the screen that I was talking to you just before you coming in. So here is the value network visualization by one single LC. And then having this banking layer, business layer, logistics layer, manufacturing layer, and finally the knowledge graph of one single LC, showing the complexity of the stakeholders here. So this is the power of knowledge graph. We make the complex data sets more understandable by those triples, that we have a subject, predicate, and object, and then suddenly both humans and machines can understand this. So finally the digital consents can be done and given by systems and processes as well, because we tend to move into automated world, and we cannot expect that there is always someone, human being, sharing the data in a proper way by giving the human touch consent for that. Finally, we have to be able to program as well the consents by different rules that we as humans are setting there, so that we can make these automated agreements available by smart contracts, for example. So we having now upcoming the tools available. Like I said, technology is usually not the problem, it's merely how we make the market practices and legal framework to approve that what we are doing from the technology side.
Great, Harry. Let's get him from the attendance.
Any other further comments? Like I said, I will share the presentation to you, so you can deep dive into those links and look into more details on really practical level, what is possible to do already. And of course, in the proof of concept, we will try to now make a experiment viable in business-wise, commercially, looking into possibility to fetch some funding and the participants to make that happen in a larger scale, so that we can start making that data sharing available according to any available rules already, so that we can start exercising in practice also the corporate data sharing in a secure manner.
Harry, Andrea, just one final consideration on my side. I think, this is my suggestion. If we want to reach the final goal to have common understanding, common analysis tools for different kind of data to different kind of players involved into the trade industry in general, from banking to shipping industry to logistics to buyers and sellers. I think I'm thinking, process overall. Maybe there is one topic we didn't discuss here, which is very practical, but maybe important as well into the process overall, which I think is education. And I mean, not just in terms of content, which is related to data, but more from practical perspective, how bring this information, this knowledge to the people, to different people which have different different resources, different education as well, different languages. So I think this can be, from a practical perspective, a big barrier for that. And how can we, by our action, try to avoid that, to reach the shorter pathway to reach the harmonization and the education of this audience?
Yeah, best way of learning is doing that by practice. That was already said by ancient Greek philosopher Aristotle. But we tend not to have time for upskill ourselves because we are too busy with the existing processes. So that's why being part of voluntary communities and the upskilling ourselves by practicing is not that common nowadays because we are too busy. And that's really a big pity that we do not have time for adapting these new technologies, new ways of working and doing things together.
Yeah, I totally agree.
All right. I guess that was it for today.
Yeah, I think it was all. If nobody else would like to make a question, I think, we'll love to end the meeting and to thank Harri for this presentation. It was very insightful. And it was, a sort of continuation of the meetings that we've had all of the over the last months. So on behalf of the SIGA, thank you so much for joining us, Harri. It was a very good session. I can't see you all during the next ones. This month, the next one, we'll keep on trying to deliver good content.
Thank you.
Thank you
everyone.
much, and all of you for being this opportunity. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.